So I've bandied this term around a lot throughout the Wholesome Halloween series, but I've got to say, just up front with this one, One Cut of the Dead is a perfect movie. And perfect doesn't mean it reaches some objective level of perfection or anything, it just feels perfect. I'm not going to give my whole monologue on what that means. I'm sure people are sick of hearing that at this point. And if you haven't heard it, you can always check it out in the Friday the 13th 6 video from Wholesome Halloween 2, where it first originated. All I really want to say with this intro is that not only is One Cut of the Dead a perfect film, it is uniquely perfect, in that you wouldn't know it until you've seen the whole thing. Let me explain. One Cut of the Dead wears its gimmick on its sleeve. It is literally in its title. It is a complete zombie movie, all done in one consecutive take. No cuts. The one shot can often be one of the hardest things to do at a high level in cinema. It often requires expert use of complex and specific equipment like specialized tracks, gimbals, drones, or a Steadicam. Did have a picture of me using a Steadicam on a shoot to go here, but I lost it, so there's a picture of somebody else using one. Could have easily just thrown that up there without that explanation, but I need you all to know that I can use a Steadicam, because I want you to think I'm cool. These allow you to pull off complex shots with lots of movement. When you look at something like this and think, how the hell did they pull this off? This being an especially impressive example from all the way back in 2009. If you ever get to see the behind the scenes, it's usually just some insane team with incredible skill using any combination of these tools in a creative way. This dude does the run up on a Segway with all that gear on him. Look at how impressive this step off is. Smooth as butter. And that shot is crazy, like mind-blowingly impressive. It's not just a long, uninterrupted take, but it's also incredibly staged and visually interesting. In one movement, we get an establishing shot that sets up the scope and scale of the Eurovision stage and audience, giving the whole thing a grand and epic feel. We then spin around the singer as he performs to the camera, bringing the grand scope into a more intimate performance where the singer feels like he's singing directly at you, but still keeping the energy and visual interest high with all of the kinetic movement. And then we move with an almost elastic whipping motion to the guitarist, just in time for a punchy, energetic strum of a few crunchy notes that cuts us into the big wide for the lull of the song. You might not think of a concert performance as having a story, but through clever staging and movement, this one shot essentially tells one. We start with scale, we explore the epicness and energy, we move through into a more personal examination of the performance and get a sense of the joint union of the band as a whole, all building to a crescendo that cuts away on the slowdown. There's peaks, there's troughs, there's a sense of place and character even. And the thing is, the level of technical skill, craftsmanship, staging and performance to pull off a shot like that is next level. And this thing is like 40 seconds long. Imagine something like that for any extended period of time. The longer you hold a one shot, the harder it becomes to execute. Every second you add onto that one shot, that's one more second of continuous performance you ask of your actors. It's one more second where everyone on set has to hit their mark. It's one more second of stamina you ask of your camera crew. And Steadicams are heavy, by the way. I know this because I've used them because I'm really cool. Give me external validation, please. Even something simple taken as a one-shot becomes extremely complex, because it's not just the act of pulling it off, it's also the act of making it interesting. The audience's brain needs some stimulation or reason for investment to latch onto. So even something completely static is going to push the demands of at least someone on set. Think about the emotional monologue from Pearl. There's a quick bit of back and forth between Pearl and her sister-in-law, and then the edit stops cutting and it just sits on Mia Goth, who now has to hold our attention with little to no movement and only a close-up of her face for 6 whole minutes. Imagine how demanding that is in terms of actor performance. Imagine how demanding that is in terms of writing, to keep that engaging for so long a period. Thankfully, Mia Goth is literally one of the finest actors alive right now, and this is genuinely one of the best moments in that already incredible movie. But what I'm saying is it's not just enough to shoot without cutting for a long time. There's more to it than time codes between cuts. It's all well and good saying, this movie has a 50-minute one-shot, but it's a static tripod take of the image of a tree that doesn't really mean anything or add anything to the plot. And yeah, you technically meet the criteria of a one-shot, but it's a bad one-shot. And the more elements and variation you add to the shot, the crazier it becomes. Add more actors, add more locations, add more action, add more camera turning, tilting and movement. It's all more things that are capable of being messed up. How many extras are you working with? Can one performer remember their cue without stumbling for a straight 5 minutes? Can 2? Can 3? Can 50? What about 20 minutes? Is it a physical shot where the actors get exhausted? Is everybody even capable of making it to the end of this thing? It takes an incredible amount of filmmaking prowess, craftsmanship, planning and choreography to do a long take one shot well. It's why when I see something like this scene from Pratchett Pink as The Protector starring Tony Jaa, I am just in absolute awe. Because can you imagine the level of dedication it takes to execute something like this? With this many people, this much movement, this much action, and this many flaws? And this is 4 minutes on a low movie budget of $5 million. Now that's a lot of preamble, but it's important preamble because I need you to fully understand just how difficult it is to pull off a complicated one-shot. Because One Cut of the Dead does it for a full movie with a beginning, middle, and end with multiple characters, multiple action scenes, and it's made with a cast of unknown actors by an independent filmmaker, Shinichiro Ueda, who had previously only made shorts, with a team fairly new to filmmaking in general. Oh, and from the looks of the behind-the-scene footage, they didn't have a Steadicam, shooting the whole thing seemingly via a shoulder rig, which is frankly mental, although no doubt that was just down to the fact that this thing had a budget of 3 million yen, which is only around $25,000. Steadicams are expensive, yo, and you still have to finance the whole rest of the movie outside of just the equipment hire. The fact that there was anything even so much as coherent created here, never mind actually good, is frankly a miracle. And on top of this all, it manages to deftly navigate some really interesting ideas despite its seemingly simple premise. So the movie starts with a film crew, under the guidance of a hack film director, trying to create a low-budget zombie movie called True Fear at an abandoned facility. Under a lot of stress due to crippling debts and desperate for the film to succeed, the director is constantly losing his cool and demanding the most committed of performances from his crew and actors. So committed, in fact, that, rolling into the location's supposedly strange past, he enacts a plan to summon real zombies. And it works. Suddenly, the cast and crew making their pretendy zombie film are getting attacked by real zombies. And the director is running around capturing it all with a manic, unhinged glee in, once again, one continuous, uncut shot. Though having said that, he is actually a character within the film, so I suppose while narratively he's doing the one-shot thing, in reality the one-shot is actually a one-shot of him doing a one-shot film. Sometimes it's a little difficult to explain things when you're talking about movies within movies. Now look, I've spent a good while praising this thing, so if you've not seen it, you're probably thinking, holy crap, a full one-shot feature and it sounds this amazing on this budget? This must be the most incredible technical masterwork ever conceived. And well, it isn't. There's kind of a big caveat I'm not telling you about. You'll notice I was fairly vague in my summary from earlier, and that was done intentionally. You see, the thing with One Cut of the Dead is, I want to talk to you about it. Oh boy do I want to talk to you about it. And while spoilers aren't normally a huge issue for this series, as I can kind of analyse things without ruining much, or a film will be so old that it's probably fair game to discuss at length, One Cut of the Dead is really special. And that specialness hits particularly well when you don't really know what you're getting into. Like, trust me, even the trailer for this film begins with a spoiler warning saying, hey, maybe don't actually watch this trailer. If you have not seen this movie and anything I've said is remotely interesting to you or you care about spoilers, I encourage you to seek it out before watching the rest of this vid. But don't necessarily watch it for the one-shot gimmick, because that aspect is not perfect by any means. It's rough, it looks amateur at times, the characters often stumble over their lines or look a little lost trying to hit the next beat, but this actually only makes the movie infinitely better. I know that sounds ridiculous, but watch it in full and you'll see what I mean. Or, if you've already seen it and you aren't bothered about spoilers, then let me explain. So, the first time I watched One Cut of the Dead myself, I had heard about its buzz and its budget, and I was pretty keen to see how this team had managed to pull off such a seemingly crazy feat. And I started watching it, and I was kind of underwhelmed, to be honest. Like I've already mentioned earlier, things felt a little patchy and rough, which honestly, that absolutely doesn't take away from the incredible feat they managed to make happen here. Again, one-shots are not easy, but for a 25 grand film, well, it looked like a 25 grand film. With all the hype and hyperbole, I thought these guys must have shot something that appeared far beyond their level of budget. So while I appreciate the ambition of what they were going for, and still to some extent the execution of what they achieved, I couldn't help but be surprised that this had made such a big splash that I was even hearing that I should be watching it. Overexposed images, cheesy costuming, odd pacing, and occasionally wonky performances betrayed its seemingly amateur and low-budget origins. It was a vibe I did genuinely enjoy, but based on how acclaimed it was becoming, it's not what I was expecting. And then it all clicks. This movie is not the movie you think it is. It is about the joy, stress, and hardship of making the movie you think this movie is. 37 minutes in, the movie you thought you were watching ends, and the credits roll. And the entire presentation changes to more traditional narrative film framing. We are taken back to a point in time where a TV drama director, a man we recognise as the director from the zombie film, is being approached by a network to direct a low-budget zombie movie to launch a new channel, the gimmick of which being that it will be a live showing, so no reshoots are possible. What's interesting in this section is we get a real sense of character drama. Nothing crazy heavy or anything, but enough to get us emotionally invested. Our director, Higurashi, feels like someone who is quite comfortable coasting in the world of TV drama and would be very reluctant to take on a challenge like this, but he decides to do so in the hopes of impressing his daughter he struggles to connect with. We see the process of them casting and rehearsing, the different challenges that come from such a difficult assignment on such a short notice, and then we get into the real meat of the film, the part that, like a final puzzle piece clicking into place on a stunning image, gives you a moment to step back, observe the thing as a whole, and be in awe of how it all comes together. They shoot the movie we watched at the beginning. That might not sound like a particularly interesting thing to close on, especially considering we've already seen the end result of their efforts. But what we didn't see was the absolute chaos that occurred in making that happen. And suddenly, it all makes sense. Everything in that first act, every staggered performance, confused direction, technical hiccup, they weren't weak improv or accidents, they were calculated, planned setups to carefully crafted payoffs that all come together in this behind-the-scenes saga. Why is the actual director of the movie also playing the director in the film? Because an actor didn't show up. Why is there that sequence of extended, stilted and awkward dialogue? Because off-screen problems meant they had to buy time for someone else. I won't go too much into examples in case you haven't seen it and weren't bothered about that spoiler warning before, because you get the main point of what I'm trying to communicate here, and this final act really is such a magical payoff that even if you know it's coming, it's still full of wonderful surprises that should definitely be experienced firsthand if you can. It's genuinely joyous filmmaking. Suddenly everything that felt junky at the beginning brings this huge smile to your face. It's hilarious, but it's also weirdly heartwarming because all these characters, completely and totally out of their depth, are just coming together as one unit and team and putting their all into tackling every problem as it arises, no matter how ridiculous the solution. All in service of art. Janky, wonky, amateurish art, but art that, throughout the duration of this closing act, every one of them grows to become extremely invested in and works so hard to make come out right. It's a real love letter to both the joys and stresses of filmmaking. There's stuff in here that feels really familiar to my own efforts, that brings me right back in time to Moments where a bunch of us were coming up with improv solutions to work out how to fit an incredibly tall vampire actor into a coffin he was too big for, or adding a piece of set design we hadn't planned on because the dude who owned a place we were renting said we could draw on the walls, or sweet talking some police into being in the movie after they interrupted a shot we were shooting behind an abandoned pub when someone had seen us staging an attack and thought it was real and called them out on us. That's real. That happened. I almost got arrested in an old short I did once. Came over to arrest us, and instead ended up finding my mate Tony's body in the film. Shit like this are why films and filmmaking is so special. Even the worst stuff is a communication of the effort of so many people just trying to make something cool or funny or interesting, and I just think it's such a joyous expression of the power of people to collaborate and of humans to express themselves. And One Cut of the Dead is such a fantastic articulation of the incredible power of the human spirit in the face of the challenge of human expression. And there's no greater moment that expresses that than its perfect ending, which I am going to talk about just because there's just no way I couldn't. So consider this your final spoiler warning. As we draw to the last moments of the movie, everything has, despite all of the troubles the team encountered, mostly gone off without a noticeable hitch, and they just need to get that final money shot. A big high-angle wide of the protagonist in the centre of the pentagram, and the crane breaks. So what do? In a moment that just perfectly encapsulates the concept of people coming together to hold each other up in the service of storytelling, they physically hold one another up, setting the camera up on a human pyramid, supporting one another. The foundations that make the film, making a very literal foundation for the camera to stand on. The little extra height they need at the top attained by the director's daughter, the daughter whose relationship he hopes to mend with this undertaking, sitting atop his shoulders. And when they finally yell cut, everyone collapses into this mess of human joy, delighted at what they managed to achieve, knowing their efforts came to something real and tangible that people can see. It's a feeling that if you've ever worked for a long time on a film in any capacity, no matter how amateur the efforts, you'll be very familiar with. And that would already be an utterly perfect ending to this just perfect whole of a movie. But there's one final hit they managed to get off that makes it even better. As everyone laughs and relaxes at a job well done, in a wordless gesture, the daughter shows her director father where she got the idea to help with the final shot from. She pulls out a picture from her childhood of her as a little girl sat atop her father's shoulders. And man, what do you even say to that? The perfect culmination of everyone's story, the perfect metaphor of the experience of the joy and the effort of creation, and the perfect articulation of how art lets us communicate ideas that words cannot. Honestly, it might be a breezy, fun comedy, but it makes me feel incredibly emotional, especially as someone who's experienced a lot of this strained catharsis, and now doubly so as someone who's just lost their father. But even before that, this ending still made my eyes wet. It is such an incredible film, and it's so unique in that it doesn't necessarily feel like one until you have the whole picture. If I can make a weird comparison, the sensation of this movie feels a bit like the early game of Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I know it's weird, but bear with us. For those of you who haven't played it, that game opens with a dull, boring, dark crawl through the sewers as you escape a dank prison. There's lots of samey looking corridors and architecture, long periods of nothing but wandering around and opening gates and a bunch of rats. It is hardly the huge open RPG the box promises, and it seems to go on forever. And then, just when you're about to give up on it, find the way out. And in stark contrast to the dank hole you just came out from, you are greeted with Cyrodiil, a brightly lit whole world of opportunities in every direction, a flowing river by your feet, snow-topped mountains in the distance, lush forests and a scope and scale you couldn't have imagined when you were crawling around in the dark trying to find the way out. Suddenly, the existence of the sewers all makes sense. It has value. It needs to be there to make this moment hit so hard. Because if you just dump the player in this lush open environment to begin with, the sheer scale and amazement of it would just go over their heads, it wouldn't sink in. Same thing here with One Cut of the Dead. And while One Cut of the Dead's opening one-shot is by no means an unpleasant time, It's only when you see the whole thing you realise that 37 minutes was the sewer, and the payoff of seeing it all come together is Cyrodiil. It all feeds into each other, and on rewatch, the inclusion of this previously kind of rough feeling opening becomes a joyous understanding of the craft behind it. And as one final note, how fantastic is the meta-narrative to this thing? And I don't mean the meta-narrative of, oh, that's cool, it's a movie within a movie. I mean the story of the actual crew who came together and made this. How poignant that a film with this central conceit, an exploration of the joys and struggles of filmmaking, told through the narrative of an inexperienced director, cast and crew coming together to make a low-budget zombie movie, was created by an actually inexperienced director, cast and crew coming together to make a low-budget zombie movie. I have no doubt many of the portrayals of joy found on the characters' faces as a result of the successful execution of their film were felt in tandem by the actors that portrayed them and the crew that shot them. I know I keep using the word perfect, but can you blame me? How perfect is that? It's not just a perfect story with perfect articulation of its perfectly executed themes. It's also been made by the absolute perfect people to tell that story. I just think this film is such a profound look at what creativity can achieve, why art matters, why the people who make art matter, fuck it, I stand with the unions, and above all else, it's just really, truly, wonderfully lovely. Watch One Cut of the Dead, tell stories, make art. It's hard work, but your life will be richer for it. And on that note, thanks again for watching, everybody. Before you go, I'd just like to remind you all this month's videos are all in support of Trans Lifeline, and all Patreon money, ad revenue, t-shirt sales and donations this month will go directly to them. So please, if you have the capacity to help out however you can, lots of links in the description below and donation buttons are all about this page. And outside of the charity efforts, I also just want to remind people that I am accredited advisor on the new In Search of Darkness mega documentary, which will explore the all too often overlooked 90s horror scene, starting with the years 1990 to 1994. And as creative advisor, I am able to offer you a lovely 10% discount if you want to pick up the movie. Once again though, just to be abundantly clear, this is unrelated to our charity efforts. The campaign just happens to be running at the same time as Wholesome Halloween, so now's the only time I can offer this. It will be absolutely killer though. The In Search of Darkness docs always are, and I was a big fan of them long before I got involved with them, so this is kind of a bit of a dream come true for me. Links to all that, as well as the discount code in the description below. And on top of that, I may also still be in the running to be this year's Face of Horror at the time of this video's release, so if I'm still there, be sure to vote for me using your free daily votes if you don't mind, and if you buy more votes, your money will help the B+ Foundation, which is a charity that helps fight childhood cancer. And finally, as the last point, you know the drill. Remember to subscribe to My Only Dance by hitting the red button below. Give me a like if you enjoyed the vid, comment with your thoughts, and hit that bell so you don't miss any uploads. Patreon is in the description if you want it, and I will see you all again tomorrow.